Welcome back. You are watching The Fix. Joining me now to continue the conversation is Sunday Times columnist Peter Bruce. Peter, hello again. Welcome.
Yeah, well, another exciting week in South Africa, and welcome, Minister. It's nice to see you.
Yes, good to see you.
You know, the city press has, not for the first time in the last couple of months, written a version of this sort of fight-back story. Cyril Ramaphosa is going to get taken out at a special National Council meeting, or there's a fight-back this week, it's the fight-back. I've managed to have a look at some of the reports that have been done, some of the forensic work that's been done into what has been happening at Transnet, and because Transnet is the start of all of this, isn't it? Now falls under you. The evidence is staggering against the people who are supposed to be now fighting back. Do we take the fight back seriously?
Well, Peter, let me first correct this. Transnet doesn't fall under me. It does not mean by saying that I'm not part of government. That actually falls under Minister Pravin Gordhan. Yeah. I'm responsible for PRASA, amongst others. Yeah. I think that we do need to take the issue of a fight back seriously. This has been raised before. In my cap as the General Secretary of the Communist Party, we've raised this before. At our Central Committee 3 months ago, we raised this thing, the issue of a fight back, which must actually be taken seriously. But as we say, I think it's important for us as South Africans to take this as a fight back against all of us. Because what is at issue? What's it at stake, amongst other things? How do we make our state-owned entity to actually serve our main agenda, which is to tackle unemployment, inequality, and poverty? Yeah. If there are wrong things that are being done, let's allow the legitimate processes to go to the bottom of that.
Can I ask you something? Because I'm sure that you're close to the president. You communicate with him. Whether we are in fact the victims of this fight back, the fact is that he's the target of it, and it seems to me that he doesn't talk enough back. He doesn't respond to it. It just basically, it's as if he's on his own, struggling against all these invisible forces that somehow appear in the Sunday papers every weekend. Why doesn't he communicate better? Why doesn't he communicate more? Those reports are staggeringly detailed. The forensics that have gone into them, both by, I think it's MSN, a firm of attorneys, and the Treasury, it's mind-boggling what I've read over the past couple of days. And there is no way out for these people. Yet, but my point simply is, I'm sorry, no reporter who'd read those reports would simply be able to take this fight back story as seriously as perhaps they would if they hadn't.
Look, let me tell you, well, we can debate about that. I think that perhaps what the president is doing is to allow the processes. And he has been quite firm in making certain decisions, like, for instance, the changing of boards and supporting us. For instance, he has been supporting me fully. I will be announcing new boards for AXA, for instance, by next week, and Sandra, as part of strengthening and stabilizing governance in our state-owned institutions. So I don't think that has actually not been communicated. On the part of the SACP today, we said we're going to support him because we think the path that he's actually pursuing is a path, interestingly enough, that's agreed upon by the alliance as a whole. Sure. The ANC at Nasrec said, go and deal with corruption and state capture.
Do I have just perhaps another way of asking a question, if you'll allow me, Karima? The president now has a fantastic opportunity to choose a new head of the National Prosecuting Authority. Right? He has 4 deputies there, and the fellow who is acting at the moment has acted on a number of occasions before. There's no reason to expect that the president will appoint this man, because he would have spent a lot of the last few years either under the control or direction of people who have the president's interests or the former president's interests at heart and not the current ones. Do you agree that he should act quickly in appointing a new National Director of Public Prosecutions?
That's what he has said, that he's going to abide by the court ruling, which gives him 90 days.
Yeah, that's not quickly, though.
Well, these things they require. These things, Peter, they require sometimes lots of engagements, consultations, discussions at various levels.
And that wouldn't have begun a long time ago.
You mean on that? Well, I don't know. As the president, he has to actually play according to the rules as much as is possible.
Talking about acting fast, as Peter's correctly said, I mean, there is a sense of impatience because you're talking about a fight back. We're talking about very few people actually having been formally charged. If you look at those who are charged, they're very junior. One of the things that does fall under your purview is the question of taxis. Its regulation, the violence around it. We have seen taxi wars on a scale that looks like, you know, what goes on in the mafia in Sicily. Many people are making links between the taxi violence and political killings, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, because many people argue that it's powerful taxi families linked to powerful political figures that control things like permits and routes. What have you been able to find out as Transport Minister? What is driving and fueling this taxi violence? And what's your plan to address it, perhaps together with someone like Becky Cele, who is the Police Minister?
Karima, look, I don't want to be cheating the viewers and the listeners. You know, the issue of sorting out taxi violence, you know, taxi attacks is something that is my priority, absolutely. Within the context, by the way, of addressing the issue of an integrated public transport system, because that's the heart of it. You cannot be able to address taxis without addressing the buses, without addressing the rail, the metro rail, and all those things pulled together. At the moment, the short term that we need to do is to go to the bottom as to who are these networks that are actually behind these killings, which is what we are doing with the Minister of Police in terms of trying to work together, who's burning the trains, who are these mafias behind the killings in the taxi industry. But it's not only a police matter. We also need to sort out a number of other things relating to the taxi industry. For instance, we have to actually discuss to strengthen the laws to begin with. We also have to discuss the issue of subsidizing of passengers across the board, because the public transport subsidy at the moment is still very much skewed towards the better off. For instance, if you look at the amount of money we spend to help Gautrain, for instance, you know, which carries the middle class and the better off people. So we have to also make those interventions as part of dealing with this problem. But that we are actually determined to deal with the problem of taxi violence, for instance, is one of the things that is my priority at the moment. Let's focus on public transport.
The truth of the matter, Minister, is that black taxis, in fact, emerged as a consequence of special apartheid planning. People lived very far from their workplaces. They spend between 40 and 60% of their salaries, of their wages, to actually get to work. We haven't seen a change in that. Where are we with affordable public transport so that people can get to work on time? Every growing economy recognizes the importance of a public transport system. We're building e-toll roads, we're building Gautrains, we're building transport for the middle classes. We're making it impossible for poor people to actually go and look for work because transport is too expensive.
That's why I was saying there are short-term measures. You know, we have to, for instance, trace and chase those who are behind violence as an immediate thing, and also identify what other immediate measures. For instance, we are amending legislation now to actually have much tougher penalties for people who are actually interfering and embarking on measures that are disturbing our public transport, including the taxis. But your medium to longer term, you are right. We unfortunately have a taxi industry that has become dependent on the apartheid spatial settlements, you know, on making long distances. Our own goal as government, you know, is that we must transform the apartheid spatial settlements so that people are not very far. But also, secondly, by an integrated transport system. Maybe in future we need to plan that minibus taxis do not have to actually make long distance. If you have got a rail-based system, we are also introducing the bus rapid transport system. Maybe we are talking about a taxi industry that actually does short routes, but also they become profitable, and also they are part of this integrated transport system. That's not going to happen overnight, but we need to lay a basis for that now in order to be able to move towards that.
Government has been trying to do that for 20 years, surely. I mean, I remember early on people talking about, you know, buying one ticket and being able to sort of, you know, travel around Johannesburg to Pretoria or wherever it might be. Getting a public sector, public transport together is extremely difficult on a national basis, so that we all think the same way and we all more or less do the same things, so that going from here to East London, let's say, isn't like going to another planet. Minister, you mentioned you were going to appoint a new AXA board next week. Why and who might we expect to see leave?
It's not an entirely new AXA board, except that it's a board of about 12 and I'll be appointing about 7. Because it's a mix, it's a mix of people whose term had expired, plus also there's been quite a number of resignations. Yes. I'm not going to mention names, but some of the resignations were very welcome, especially against the background of state capture.
AXA in trouble?
And some of the people that AXA is not really in trouble. It's one of our entities together with Sandra.
And what about the executives, Minister? Well. Are you also going to aim for some of the executives, or are you only making board changes at this stage?
Well, it's both where executives are needed. For instance, at PRASA, just about everybody who is in the executive is acting. You know, I need to make sure, and what I've told the board is that make permanent appointments, you know, as part of
what about Sanral? You said earlier even Sanral board is up for change. What are we expecting there?
Yes, I will be announcing, you know, with cabinet concurrence, hopefully, you know, a new board of Sanral before the end of this week. It's Sunday today. As well as AXA, in order to be able to address this. I'm not at liberty now to say so because, as the minister, I recommend to cabinet. Cabinet may turn around and say, well, you know, we not agree with this or that. But AXA, yes, I'll be appointing a new chairperson, as well as Sandra also there will be a new chairperson.
And you've had those conversations already?
You mean,
you've had the conversations with the people concerned. You're just waiting for
yes,
cabinet
that's
approval.
right, for cabinet to be able to approve. And
I'm out of time, but I'm going to ask you one last question.
Yes.
The issue around, you know, going for different people and different executives. How are you going to get past all the legislation? How are you going to get past all the different ways in which people are going to fight you back, you know, on this matter, particularly when it comes to e-tolls? The deputy chair of the province of Gauteng, who's the MEC for Education, Panyaza Lesufi, he said the Gauteng conference decided that e-tolls must go. You, the National Transport Minister, are you going to let e-tolls go?
That's a matter that we are discussing right now. Because unfortunately, e-tolls is not just a provincial Gauteng matter when it comes to financing.
But it's an ANC decision here, taken here in Gauteng.
That's fine. But as national government, we have to consider that as well as other considerations as well. The fact of the matter is that in today's numbers, we actually are owing more than 60 billion rands on the e-tolls. Yeah. That money has to be paid. So that's part of the discussion. Who is going to pay that money? Is it from the fiscus? The fiscus is hard pressed already. So we will have to have discussions and we will listen to everybody. But we are aware that we have to finalize that matter as soon as possible so that it doesn't drag forever.
I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to be speaking to him, Peter. Minister Nzimande, thank you so very much. That's, of course, Dr. Blade Nzimande, Minister of Transport, still ahead on The Fix. We speak to our panel of experts about the big stories coming up again this week in the week ahead.